You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower. Whether you have experienced domestic violence personally or not, someone you know has. Your circle of family, friends, acquaintances, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. Physical abuse is only one of the many forms of domestic violence. Survivors also report experience of verbal, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, electronic, and so much more. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It can leave you traumatized and devastated, mentally, emotionally, financially. You can find yourself homeless, jobless, helpless. The list can go on. There's blankets of insecurities, triggers, doubts, and other residual effects that become hurdles that impact our life as we do our best to move on. Many people associate butterflies with a sense of freedom. We've been taught along the way to focus on the transformation that takes place inside of the cocoon. I invite you to take a moment to conceptualize all the odds the caterpillar was up against and needed to defeat in order to get to a safe place, to build its cocoon and actually experience the transformation. My name is A. Garcia. I am a mother and survivor of a double attempted homicide. Now, I'm dedicating my life to take yours to the next level by experiencing post-traumatic growth to begin a new chapter in your life. Let's get started on this journey together. Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code. Hey, Garcia here, and thank you for tuning in. What we cover here is not intended to ignite any triggers. For what you want to conquer, you must confront. So, welcome to Confronting Domestic Violence. And today I have a wonderful lady with us. Her name is Miss Lise, and she is willing to openly share her exposures and experiences to domestic violence. Welcome, Lise.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, it is my honor. Wow, we had quite some conversations, not just backstage, but I would say over the past 4 or 5 months.
Yes, we have. We've had some interesting conversations. Yes.
Yeah, and I am just so elated to have gotten to know you and on this level and in this arena because we share such big open hearts as it relates to giving back to our community and making a difference and doing things for, women that have gone through a form of domestic violence. And I don't want to take your platform. You're on the spotlight, honey, so please
Well,
share wherever you want to begin.
okay. Well, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for that because I agree. I think the connection that we've made and the friendship that continues to grow is really important to me. And I always feel like really anybody that I meet, whether it's someone that stays in my life for a few days or a few months or a few years, or forever, is I always look at it as something I need to learn from them or vice versa, right? I try to see the lesson in it, basically. So um I think as far as domestic violence, it starts way back from when I was a child. I've witnessed things. I myself I don't ever feel that I was abused in my home by my parents. My parents were divorced, but I saw a lot of domestic violence in the family. Um, and I had some older brothers that were very verbally abusive to me. So I did deal with that from a very young age, which totally affected me throughout the years and didn't really discover a lot of that until therapy and, learning and growing and healing on my own wounds. So um, I then went into my first relationship with my oldest son's father, who was abusive in every way, financially, physically. everything but sexually, I would say. But you know, that for me, I walked away from that pretty quickly. As young as I was only 19, but I knew that I did not want my child to ever grow up hurting another person, man or woman. Did you know, I never wanted that. And I knew that if I stayed, that would happen. And as much as I did it for me, I did it so much more for my son. I didn't want him growing up to hurt other people or to think that that was okay. That was normal. Um, so I did leave him. I was 19, 20. I was 20. Put him on a Greyhound back to Jersey.
Wow. And he left willingly, like, okay, it was not a problem.
Yeah, not too much. I mean, he had come to live with me, and he was from New Jersey, and I was in Minnesota at the time. And you know, he had a drug habit, and he had a cheating habit, and he was very controlling. You know, total power and control for sure. Um, and so, no, I don't think that he necessarily wanted to leave, but I think also he wasn't, I wasn't putting up with what he thought I was going to put up with. So I think he felt better about going back to where he was probably most comfortable at, you know, at home in Jersey. So, um, and sadly, you know, he wasn't much involved with my son's life, but that was probably a good thing because, you know, he struggled with drugs and I'm sure like most people deep down he um he had a good heart, but drugs overtook him, and growing up with probably his own domestic violence added to all of it. So he kind of turned out he was a product of his environment basically. Um so should I keep going or do you
Yeah,
want
well, I was gonna ask. Okay, let me ask some questions.
yeah,
So,
I was like, I just keep going, tell you my life story, but yes, you go right ahead.
and that's the thing, Lise, is like most of us that have gone through a form of domestic violence, it hasn't been just a form. We've learned that there are many forms
Hmm.
because we left one and then found ourselves maybe in another, but maybe comparing what we have now versus what we had before. So it's not so bad. So we allow certain things.
Sure.
And it is natural, human behavior to do comparisons. You always compare, is this better than what I had? Because
Right.
if the answer is no, I'm out of here. That's easy, right?
Right, right.
But when it is a little better, you kind of you always have that worst case scenario to compare something to. So I've learned along the ways and in interviewing, a lot of women that have had experience is that,
Mhm.
that's kind of unfortunately that hamster wheel that we talk about often.
Right.
And you said a couple of things and you earlier on that I would like to circle back on and ask. You said that you were exposed to verbal abuse growing up,
Mhm.
and that allowed you to identify the extended abuse that you were experiencing as teenager.
Mhm.
So I wanted to ask, how were your parents talking to you, seeing you being affected by what was happening in the household?
Well, it would be my mom because you know, my mom raised me and my parents were divorced, but my
Okay.
mom um, went after them. I will say my mother was very upset. Every time it happened, I told my mom, and my mom always, you know, took care of it. But these were adults, you know, these were, um, I was probably, you know, 6 or 7. This is a 20-some-year-old adult. And it was always about my weight. I was always a little chubby when I was a kid. It was always about that. Um, and so it definitely affected my self-esteem and my body image for sure as I dealt with some anorexia in high school. And yeah, so it definitely affected me. Um,
Did you seek help while you were in school going through that? Were you recognizing that maybe you were going through that as an outcome of what you're dealing with at home? Like,
Yeah, no, not as a teenager, not at all. And I feel like in that time frame too, that was the 80s, right? So like Kate Moss was the body that you were seeing everywhere, right? And I was I would go to this place. It was this like weight loss clinic. And I remember starting it and thinking I was so overweight and I was 138 pounds or something.
That's my goal
And
today.
yeah, yeah, I'm like, I wish I weighed 138 right now, but but I they had me only on 4 to 500 calories a day. So I was passing out at school. My blood pressure was really low, finally to the point where my mother was very concerned and she didn't even know I was going to this place, right? My boyfriend in high school paid for it.
Wow.
Yeah. So they eventually kicked me out of the program because I had lost too much weight.
They kicked you out. And you know how back then you didn't need consent, like parental
No,
consent.
that's what I thought too. No.
That's what they're feeding you malnutrition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So that definitely played a part through those teen years. And no, I never looked back and thought about, the verbal abuse. I never thought about that or the mental, emotional part of it. I didn't. It didn't recognize it at that time in my life.
Right. And I don't think a lot of us do. Just like obviously if we recognized, the silent covert forms of domestic violence, we wouldn't end up in that. So I
Mhm.
mean, it's totally normal, natural, especially in teenage years. You really don't know, you don't have the capacity, you
Right.
think you know what's going on, but you're just going with the flow. So I mean, what how did you get through that? Was there not people or teachers like reaching out and asking, "Are you okay? I see you in my class every day. I see that you're like dwindling. What's going on?" Was there any
Yeah.
sort of like concern?
Yeah, it was my mom. My mom was the one that got concerned. I got kicked out of the program probably. I don't even remember now if I probably told her about it because I told my mom everything, but I wasn't telling her while I was going there, you know. So it was my mom that got me back, eating better. And but I was like working out like before school and after school and before bed. Like it was just obsessive behavior. And I after I graduated high school, I went and nannied across country. I went to Connecticut. So I was gone then, I was gone for 2 years nannying. So, or two separate times. Um, so I mean, my mom was always my rock and always the one that pulled me out of anything. But yeah, that was kind of a scary time.
It sounds like it. And I was gonna
Mhm.
ask too, just to dig a little further, right? Um,
Sure.
like how did you cope? What were your coping mechanisms and how did you get through that time in your life? I mean, I understand your mom really helped a lot, but that self-esteem that you're talking about, that, those self-doubts and that negative headspace.
Yeah, that would I have to say that would be my high school boyfriend, my first love. Yes, absolutely. He was amazing. Um, and he's actually the person that got me to accept my freckles for the first time when I was 17 years old. I hated them. I mean, I was obsessed with getting rid of them as a young child. Um, but he loved them and he would always say how sexy they were. And and I just would think, you know, um, but he's definitely, yeah, he was that one, that one. We all have that one. I still think about him today. He's an amazing person. So yeah, he was through my whole high school, 11th, 12th grade. Um, and that's during the time that I was having that eating disorder. It had nothing to do with him because he was not ever pushed, never pushed me. It was all in here and in here
Right.
what was going on. So
And so is it a fair question to ask? So when you met your oldest son's father,
mhm.
was that your boyfriend after this great guy that you had in high school? Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I'm asking that because sometimes we also feel like because we're good people and the last person we were with, it was a good person, that the next person is good too.
Mhm. Yes, and that definitely was not the case. No.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
sometimes we go in with that, desire and naiveness, both stronger than reality.
Oh, yes.
And and so what would you say today, your wiser self, how
Mhm.
long would you tell a teenager or, somebody's coming fresh out of high school,
Mhm.
wait about X amount of time before you get real serious and in love because it takes X amount of time for the crap to surface to see if that's really what you want to deal with, like the actual character of a person. What
Yeah.
would you think? What would you
I
say?
would say 3 months, 3 to 6 months, but I would also say usually most especially if you're dealing with someone who's got narcissistic behaviors or tendencies or is just a narcissist, they can only hold it together for about 3 months, right?
That's right.
But if you're also looking at it from a standpoint of, okay, I went on a date with this kid in high school or whatever, if they call them dates now, I don't know. But whatever the case may be, if there's a red flag on date one, if there's something that you feel in your soul, in your gut, that's like, ooh, that was kind of icky or whatever, I think that's it right there. I would probably give them maybe one more chance after that. I mean, and that's because I'm hypersensitive to it now,
Right.
So if I go on a date now, it's like if I get one thing, I'm out.
And that's so funny because I totally that's okay.
Okay.
I
Oh,
totally
okay.
I totally agree with that. And on top of that, it's like I hold a class through Be Your Incredible Self. I hold a class where I talk about flags. If you're seeing the red flags, does that mean that's where the
Yeah.
party's at? Because some people will literally be like, yeah, that's where the party's at. Where, other people who are more in tune with what those red flags really mean, then I dig a little bit deeper and say, like, okay, so are you sure they're theirs or are they yours?
Yeah, because sometimes they are mine.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. Yes,
Same.
they
I'm
are.
guilty.
Yep, yep. Learn that in therapy.
Yeah. And and I love that you keep saying that because between therapy and your mom, it sounds
Yeah.
like that was your community that
Mhm.
to support and uplift and empower. And there's so many women that, try to either take on the issue themselves,
Mhm.
the trauma is what I'm talking about specifically, the mental and emotional trauma that we endure
Yep.
coming from, a place of domestic violence. And it just feels like we either want to confront it ourselves and try to figure out ourselves because it's easier to close off and keep it to ourselves, especially
Mhm.
as strong women. When we like problem solvers, we're like, oh, okay, I got this, I got me, right?
Right.
And then there's other women that will sweep it under the rug and completely ignore it, pretend it didn't happen because that's their easiest way to cope. And then I bring up, so what happens when you trip over that lump under the carpet that you swept
Mhm.
all that stuff in your later years because it doesn't go away,
Right.
So really being able to confront, confront is not a negative combative word. It's to,
No.
face something that you care about enough to seek resolution for. And if you already know that you're dealing with a mental space or a character within yourself that doesn't even feel like you, and you're trying to get out of it, and it's nothing is working, then it's like mark the calendar, look at the calendar and say, okay, this is when it's going to stop. And if it doesn't stop after that date, then go and seek the help. Because if not, it's almost like you're giving it an infinite amount of time to carry on. If you don't have that deadline set on your calendar, that end date, it's almost like you're giving it an infinite amount of time to carry on.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, and that it sounds harsh. It really does. It's like, oh, I'm just supposed to get over it tomorrow. No, but if you don't have a dedicated or goal in mind of when you're going to be over it, then you have to understand when to not allow it to continue anymore.
Right.
And that's with yourself or with, loved ones, whoever your support is. And if you can, seek outside help, then yeah, that's what's there. Because when we're in it, I said it the other day, it's hard to throw yourself the lifesaver when you're the one drowning,
Yes. Hmm.
you
Yeah,
know?
I see this with clients a lot.
So
Hmm.
that mental, emotional, physical, financial, spiritual, all of these different traumas that we carry because of what we have gone through, and most of it by somebody that we love, somebody that we trusted, somebody that we gave our heart to. So it comes full circle to, can I trust me again?
Right.
And we're constantly like, oh, I don't trust anybody. I can't trust them. I don't trust anybody. But when you're saying anybody, you're not really talking about outward.
Well, right. I mean, it's like it's the same analogy if you look at trust versus love, right? Are you really fully capable of loving someone else if you're not fully capable of loving yourself unconditionally, right?
That's
That's
right.
difficult.
That
That's
is.
that can be really easy to say, just love yourself, but
Yeah.
how many people really do, right? I mean, that is a gift when you're able to do that. And so the same with trust, right?
Yeah.
You've got to trust yourself in order to really fully trust anybody else.
Yeah,
So
you're
that's
absolutely right. You do have to trust yourself before you can trust yourself. And it's very parallel to, what they say about parenting. You can't take care of your kids if you're not taken care of. So
right,
same thing as adults, after the mommy hat is off and you're just mom. It's like the same thing.
right, right. Yeah, because you
So
can, oh, go ahead.
no, 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 please.
I was just going to say, just when you just said the mommy hat, it's like that's the easy one of the easiest ways to lose yourself, right? When you become a mother, because now you're just wearing this hat, and that's your hat. And it's like, oh, who's
24/7.
Lisa again? I forgot her. Like, oh yeah, she's kind of cool. She's pretty fun. I gotta find her again, right? So
Right.
I learned that lesson with my throughout my children, and I've had some experience. So yes.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
and I know now, today, I mean, talk about post traumatic growth. That's what I like to bring to the forefront every chance I
Yes.
get.
Yeah, I love it.
Post traumatic growth is where we become wiser and stronger individuals from the trauma we experienced. And for you, you're giving back in such a huge way. If you don't mind, please share with us, what you're doing to give back, and not just for yourself. Of course, that's where you have to start, but in the community. I mean, you've done some phenomenal things.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so I teach trauma informed yoga at the Center Against Sexual and Domestic Abuse. I'm also the domestic abuse program coordinator. And for me personally, yoga has been my savior in not just dealing with my own traumas, but day to day life, relationship issue, everything. It's between that and, meditation, which is a limb of yoga. It has been my savior. And so I am so passionate about sharing that and to anyone who wants to hear it for any amount of time, because that's the one subject I can go a long time on. And generally, I can be pretty quiet. But when you get me talking about something that I know has, I'm living proof of what it's done for me.
Mm.
So I work with the women in our shelter, women and men that come into our shelter. They can attend the yoga. It's once a week. We have a space in the community that another business has offered to us for free to use the space for the yoga class, which is just amazing. And then also our outreach clients can come to yoga. So it's it's just been for me healing just as much for me as it is for them, because I see, during class, sometimes people breaking down, which happens pretty much every week. Someone is having some type of emotional transformation. And, at the time, I think a lot of the time, especially if they're new to class, they're thinking that, this shouldn't happen, or I shouldn't be, I'm sorry, they're apologizing. And it's like, no, to me, I'm not happy that you're crying, but I'm happy that you're crying. right? Because you're releasing it, and crying is very cleansing. But yoga, in the postures and the asanas that you're doing in yoga, are opening up those areas where we carry that emotional trauma, where we've manifested it. Hips are huge for that. So when people are in these hip opening poses, all of the sudden, they may be thinking about spaghetti for lunch, and then the next thought is something that maybe they haven't thought of since childhood, or maybe that just happened 3 days ago, but that was traumatic. And all of a sudden it rushes to the surface and they don't know why. And so I'm always, reminding them in class, just allow whatever comes to come. And, if you fight it, that's okay. You can try again tomorrow or whenever you practice again. But the more that you can allow, the more that you can release these traumas from your body. And then it's healing everything. It's healing your heart. And that's really the biggest thing, because, our heart vibration is 6 feet away from our bodies. Our brain is only 12 inches, I think. Felt that long. So,
and and what you're saying, what you're talking about is that body mind connection that
yes,
people still have yet to really wrap their head around, that what you think your body can react to, what you're physically going through, your mind can respond to it. There is that mind body connection.
yes,
Always.
yes, absolutely. So, the body keeps the score. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and that's specifically what it's talking about. So whatever level or whatever language you want to use on what type of trauma you've had, or what level of trauma you're at, or form, or whatever, is that the body is constantly keeping the score of all of that. So if you have a headache, more than likely it's created from something within you that has happened to you emotionally, right? Not always, but of course there's physical manifestations that can happen from other reasons. But cancer, ulcers, inflammation, all of these are due to not just trauma, but trauma, the foods we're eating, the environment, all of it compacted into one. And those emotional traumas are so I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Like detrimental.
Yeah, they're so detrimental to the body. So I see in my program 23-year-olds who have high blood pressure, who have ulcers, who are in and out of urgent care and emergency rooms because they have all these physical manifestations. They've got Crohn's disease. They've got, fibromyalgia. The list is endless. And it's all due to the trauma. I would guess that 80% of it is due to the trauma.
Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.